At night, the Sphinx doesn't sleep. It breathes. The wind drifts across the Giza plateau like whispered code, grains of sand tapping against the stone, as if trying to wake something ancient beneath it. When you stand here long enough, you begin to feel it. The ground isn't still. It moves, slowly, like a vault exhaling through the cracks of time. They say there's nothing beneath it. No rooms, no tunnels, no truth left to find. But history doesn't erase itself so easily. Scattered through centuries, sketches, notes, alignments, whispers of Orion, all pointing to a door, one we keep turning the wrong way. Tonight, we follow those traces, not to prove anything, but to listen, to see if the desert itself still remembers what the world chose to forget. It didn't begin with sand or stone. It began in the dark, somewhere between silence and starlight. When I was a child, I would stare into the Orion constellation until my eyes watered. There was something unsettling about its symmetry. 3 bright stars across a belt so perfect, it felt engineered. Years later, standing under the same sky with a telescope at my side, I realized I wasn't alone in that obsession. Humanity has been staring back at Orion for tens of thousands of years. Astronomers describe the Orion region like poets, forced to use equations. A nursery of fire, where new suns are born inside swirling clouds of gas and dust. They speak of it with reverence, as if it were a cathedral made of plasma. And perhaps, in a way, it is. Because across the world, from the Mayan jungles to the Nile Valley, from the Hopi mesas to the stones of Nabta Playa, people built monuments that seem to echo the pattern of those same stars. The odds of pure coincidence? Possible. The weight of cultural obsession? Undeniable. If you think of history not as a timeline but as a mirror, Orion keeps appearing behind us, watching, waiting, whispering something we haven't yet translated. The Egyptians saw it as Osiris, god of rebirth, whose soul rose each night into the sky. The Greeks called it Orion, the hunter immortalized by Zeus. In Japan, it was Tsuzuraboshi, a fisherman of light. And for the Maya, it was the cosmic hearth, where the first fire of creation was lit. Different languages, same coordinates, a universal gesture of the human hand pointing upward. There's a reason I linger here, before we ever touch the sands of Giza. Because this pattern, the one drawn in stars and later etched in stone, is not the work of myth-makers chasing coincidence. It's the fingerprint of an ancient literacy. Look at the alignments. The 3 pyramids of Giza tracing the belt of Orion, the layout of Teotihuacan mirroring its slope, the standing stones of the Sahara tilted toward the same cosmic line. Coincidence, perhaps, but the same kind of coincidence that repeats across continents and centuries starts to feel less random and more like a forgotten language whispering through architecture. You see, ancient civilizations didn't just look up. They communicated with the heavens. Temples became telescopes. Pyramids became instruments. They weren't building tombs. They were building translations. But every translation hides a question. What were they trying to say? If architecture and astronomy were once the same language, then the monuments we study are not silent relics. They are sentences, carved in limestone and aligned with eternity. To read them, we must learn to listen differently, not only with instruments, but with awe. Because perhaps the true conspiracy isn't that ancient people worshipped stars, but that they understood them. And that's where our journey begins, not beneath the Sphinx yet, not in the catacombs of stone, but in the sky, where the first map was drawn long before human hands could follow it on the ground. If the heavens were their blueprint, then the earth itself became their experiment. And somewhere between those two, between the stars above and the stones below, lies the signal that refuses to fade. The story of Orion doesn't end in the sky. It descends, slowly, deliberately, onto the earth. Like a reflection rippling across continents, the same celestial geometry appears again and again, carved in places that should have never known each other. Sometimes I wonder if we've mistaken coincidence for conversation. The first whisper comes from the Sahara, a place where silence itself has weight. At Nabta Playa, stones rise from the sand in a fragile circle, their edges worn, but their intent unmistakable. When dawn breaks, light cuts through the ring and falls across the desert floor, as if the earth is remembering a language it once spoke with the stars. Archaeologists call it a prehistoric calendar. I call it an act of memory, a moment when early humans decided to draw time itself. You stand there, the air vibrating with heat. And you realize this isn't random placement, it's rhythm, a cosmic pulse that has been echoing for thousands of years, waiting for someone to listen again. That pulse continues westward, carried by ocean and epoch, until it finds a new home in the Valley of Mexico. Here, in Teotihuacan, the geometry matures. Two massive pyramids face the Avenue of the Dead, their proportions whispering the same three-star alignment that once burned above the Sahara. When you climb to the top and the wind presses against your chest, you can almost feel the weight of their mathematics, a discipline so exact it blurs into devotion. Perhaps they weren't imitating Orion's belt. Perhaps they were extending it. The ancients of Teotihuacan didn't just look up. They brought the heavens down, measured them, and built them into stone until faith and physics became the same act. At sunset, the light spills across the pyramid's edge, mirroring the tilt of Orion as it rises on the opposite side of the world. The air hums, the same hum I once felt in the Sahara. Coincidence or continuity? Follow that vibration further north, across time and legend, and it leads you to the plateaus of the American Southwest, to the homeland of the Hopi. There, three sacred mountains stand in perfect dialogue with three bright stars. To the Hopi, these peaks are not monuments, but living relatives, anchors of a cosmic covenant that ties earth and heaven together. They don't seek proof, they seek balance. They don't measure, they remember. Standing among them, you sense the same pattern. But this time, it breathes. It's no longer architecture, but relationship. The stars above aren't gods to be worshipped. They're kin, whispering across millennia. We're still here. Three worlds, three echoes of the same design, each built by hands that never touched, each guided by eyes that looked at the same sky. From the stone circles of Africa to the pyramids of Mexico to the mountains of Arizona, the map repeats. You could call it geometry, you could call it faith. But maybe it's something else entirely, a memory of connection, shared by civilizations who refuse to see the heavens as up there, because to them, the heavens were home. And if this pattern, this living map, keeps reappearing, then what happens when we trace it back to the one place where stone and sky align perfectly, where the earth itself seems to point upward, daring us to look deeper? Because if every echo began somewhere, then perhaps the first heartbeat of this celestial language still pulses beneath those paws. The desert changes at night. It exhales. The wind no longer bites. It whispers, winding through the limestone like breath through an ancient flute. And there, half buried in shadow and myth, the Sphinx waits. It doesn't watch the stars. It aligns with them. Its gaze fixed toward the horizon where Orion rises, as if the heavens and the earth are locked in a silent conversation, one that has lasted for 12,000 years. I used to think the Sphinx was a monument. Now I think it's a memory, a fossil of intention, a being carved not only from stone, but from a code of alignment, proportion, and power we still don't fully understand. For decades, rumors have bled through the sand. Talk of hidden chambers, of a city beneath, of passages sealed and sealed again. Some say they were dug for kings. Others whisper they were dug to hide something far older, a record from a civilization that burned before Egypt was born. But each time the story rises, the desert swallows it back. In 1935, excavators reported finding a vast underground complex near the Sphinx, a few photographs, a few trembling notes. Then, silence. The reports vanished, and the researchers fell quiet, their names fading into the archives like dust into wind. Years later, television crews filmed narrow shafts and flooded corridors. Footage leaked, half-lit, half-drowned chambers, with carvings half erased by time. And yet, official voices insisted there was nothing there. No rooms, no tunnels, just shadows and imagination. But science, when silenced, echoes louder. When I look at the Sphinx, I don't see stone. I see layers, eras pressed into one another like sediment of memory. I see repairs on repairs, weathering that doesn't match its own face. The head too small for the body, the crown oddly cut, an older monument wearing a newer mask, and beneath, ground-penetrating scans confirm anomalies, voids, cavities, spaces that geometry alone can't explain. Are they natural hollows, ritual tunnels, or something the ancients wanted us to find only when we were ready? There is a pattern of denial here as consistent as the stars above it. Each discovery met not with curiosity, but with caution, politics, and silence. Perhaps it's fear. Fear of rewriting history, or fear of what rewriting might reveal. Because if there is a city below, if there truly are chambers beneath this guardian of the desert, then the story of humanity doesn't begin with pyramids. It begins with memory older than civilization itself. I've walked the perimeter at dusk when the tourists are gone and the wind returns. The light bleeds gold, then indigo, then black. You can hear the Sphinx breathe, not in sound, but in pressure, the faint tremor underfoot, like a pulse deep within the rock. Maybe that's all it is, a trick of temperature and imagination. Or maybe, just maybe, it's something else. A heartbeat. The echo of the first architecture, the pulse of the sky written into stone, waiting for us to remember the language. So I listen, not to the stories of forbidden archaeology or political walls. I listen to the ground itself, because every myth begins as vibration, and beneath the pause of the Sphinx, that vibration continues, steady, patient, eternal. It doesn't ask for belief. It asks for attention. Somewhere under that silence, the gate beneath waits, not for explorers, but for listeners. Sometimes, when I think about the Sphinx, I think about sound. Not words, not chants, but the deeper kind, the sound that shapes matter. The one you don't hear with your ears, but with your bones. Because long before our species learned to build engines, we learned to build resonance. In laboratories today, scientists float tiny objects with focused sound waves. Acoustic levitation, they call it. A sterile name for something that looks like magic rediscovered. A bead of glass hovering in still air, refusing gravity's command. Now imagine the same principle, scaled, ancient, ritualized. Not as technology, but as theology. Priests striking golden rods, chanting into the limestone air, tuning their voices until the stones themselves began to move. Impossible? Yes. And yet, something inside you hesitates before saying it. Because stories survive when they carry truth wrapped in wonder. Ancient texts speak of sacred tones that raised monoliths, walls collapsing to trumpets, temples built to hum in divine frequency. Archaeologists debate it. Physicists roll their eyes. But inside every skeptic is a small ache, a whisper asking, what if the ancients understood vibration the way we understand voltage? I have stood inside chambers where a single syllable ripples through the walls and returns changed. Not echo, but dialogue. A low frequency that shakes your ribs, a resonance that feels alive. Temples, tombs, cathedrals. They were never just built to honor gods. They were built to speak to them. Stone, frequency, intention. 3 elements of the oldest science we've ever forgotten. It makes me think of Tesla, that restless genius who once called the pyramids machines of the earth. He spoke of wireless energy, of the planet as a conductor, of power drawn not from coal or fire, but from the air itself. They called him mad. But every visionary sounds insane until time catches up. Tesla believed energy could be harvested through geometry and resonance, through shapes that focused the planet's own charge. And what shape did he return to again and again? The pyramid. He said the key was hidden in numbers. 3, 6, 9, the rhythm of creation. To most, just numerology. To him, the architecture of reality. It's easy to dismiss these parallels as coincidence, but the pattern persists. Ancient builders aligning temples to frequencies. Modern inventors building towers that hum like tuning forks. 2 eras separated by millennia, yet both listening to the same invisible hum beneath the world. Maybe that's what myth really is. Not fiction, but memory of physics once known, then lost. When the ancients spoke of the voice of the gods, perhaps they weren't being poetic. Perhaps they were describing resonance, that shiver between matter and energy, between prayer and technology. Because sound, after all, is pressure, and pressure becomes movement, and movement, given form, is power. Maybe they never had machines. Maybe they were the machines. Biological transmitters of a forgotten harmony, able to tune the earth itself. Standing before the Sphinx, I can almost imagine it, not as a statue, but as an instrument. A vast tuning fork of stone, its body resting above aquifers, its chambers carved to amplify vibration, singing to the planet beneath. What if those tunnels we search for were not corridors for travel, but resonance chambers, designed to make the earth itself hum? It sounds impossible. But then again, so does flight, until someone does it. Every myth hums with an undertone of science, every legend with a pulse of truth. Perhaps that's the lesson hidden in the gate beneath. Not that the ancients were gods, but that they once remembered what it meant to listen to the earth. And maybe, in trying to decipher them, we're not just studying their past. We're relearning our own forgotten language. Every frequency leaves an echo. Every echo, a signature. And somewhere between myth and mathematics, that signature is calling again. The desert doesn't reveal things easily. It remembers first. It weighs your intent before it gives you anything at all. Every grain of sand around the Sphinx has been moved, brushed, and catalogued by hands desperate to know. But maybe the question isn't what's down there. Maybe the question is, should we open it? There's a law that every archaeologist learns early. The past isn't yours. It's on loan. A gift from those who came before, entrusted to those who will come after. But standing before that ancient stone guardian, I've felt the pull, the temptation to pry. To reach beneath its paws and find the answer history keeps whispering. It's an ache every explorer knows, that small, trembling line between curiosity and desecration. If there truly is a chamber below, a vault untouched for millennia, what happens when the first beam of modern light cuts through its darkness? Does it illuminate truth or erase the sacred silence that protected it? Because discovery isn't neutral. It changes the thing discovered. It shifts the balance between mystery and memory. Every opened tomb, every unsealed door is both revelation and rupture. I've met men who believe truth must be taken by force, drilled, dug, extracted, and others who insist it must remain untouched, that the mystery itself is the message. Maybe both are wrong. Maybe the real task isn't to conquer the unknown, but to negotiate with it. Knowledge has weight, and sometimes the cost of lifting it is measured not in gold or fame, but in what we lose when the unknown becomes ordinary. In moments like this, I think of the old philosophers, those who said wisdom was not about possession, but restraint. That some doors exist not to be opened, but to remind us we still have thresholds. Perhaps that's what the ancients meant by guardians, not monsters protecting treasure, but symbols teaching patience, keepers of proportion between human hands and cosmic scales. If the chambers beneath the Sphinx do exist, they are not waiting for conquerors. They are waiting for listeners, for minds willing to enter not with drills and headlines, but with reverence. Because once a secret is uncovered, it stops being sacred. And perhaps the sacred was never meant to be solved, only understood, quietly. I imagine that door, stone against stone, sealed in silence older than writing. No hinges, no handle, just a seam in the dark, a line between worlds. Would I open it? If I'm honest, I don't know. Part of me longs to. The other part hopes no one ever does, because some truths, once seen, can never be unseen. And in chasing them, we risk losing the very sense of wonder that drew us here. Maybe that's the final lesson of the Sphinx. Not every mystery exists to be solved. Some exist to remind us of humility, that even in our age of machines and algorithms, the universe still keeps a few secrets, and the door between knowing and wonder is best left slightly ajar. The night over Giza never truly turns black. There's always a faint shimmer, dust, light, memory suspended in the air. If you stand there long enough, you start to hear it. Not the wind, not the city, but the low hum of alignment, the sound of Earth remembering its place among the stars. Orion glows on the horizon, and for a brief moment, its 3 stars hang directly above the line of the pyramids. No lasers, no calculations, just coincidence perfectly timed. And you realize, this is what the ancients saw, what they felt. They weren't chasing gods, they were mapping home. I run my hand along the warm limestone, and it feels less like rock, more like braille, a language carved for hands that dare to read it. Every groove, every erosion, a syllable in a sentence too large for one lifetime. We've measured it, scanned it, photographed it 1,000 times, and yet the mystery remains, not because it hides from us, but because it speaks in geometry, silence, and patience. Maybe that's what this whole journey has been about. Not to prove anything, but to listen differently. To see how across deserts and oceans, through temples, mountains, and myths, humanity kept sketching the same shape. A reminder that we are both the architects and the witnesses of a language older than words. The map was never meant to guide us outward. It was meant to guide us inward. So I close my notebook. The wind lifts the last page, and for a heartbeat, it flutters in rhythm with the stars above, as if the sky itself were turning a page with me. Somewhere between the heavens and the stone, the story continues, in light, in sound, in silence. All we have to do is keep listening. Every mystery is a mirror, and sometimes the reflection is us. The sound is still there, that quiet hum we first heard beneath the sand. It lingers, faint and patient, like the breath of the earth refusing to fade. Even now, as the stars tilt westward and the desert cools, the air carries that same vibration, the one that followed us from the Orion sky, through stone circles and lost cities, to the shadow beneath the Sphinx's paws. It's strange, isn't it? We came searching for answers written in dust, and found instead the echo of our own questions. Every mystery we uncovered pointed back, not to gods or lost civilizations, but to something softer, the human longing to remember where we came from. Somewhere, beyond the noise of certainty, there's still that thin line between knowing and wonder. And maybe that's where we belong. We are not the first to walk this map. We will not be the last. But as long as we keep listening, to stone, to silence, to one another, the story continues. So let us stay curious. Let us keep asking. And if these whispers have moved something inside you, share it. Not as proof, but as conversation. A way for all of us to keep tracing the stars together. Because in the end, every secret is just light, waiting for someone to listen. Chronicle of Secret, where the past still speaks. Let's listen together.